Hello and welcome back to Adara's Altar. This is a part 2 on the video that I made entitled The Tea on what it's like to be a virgin waiting for marriage. I am 25 in about 5 months and I am indeed still a virgin waiting for marriage. I've never had my first kiss. I made a promise to God, which is why I have a purity ring, to save my first kiss for my wedding. And so in this video, I want to talk about why I am still waiting for marriage at the age of almost 25. Especially in a generation where I personally have experienced losing many female friendships because of my decision to wait for marriage. I have my mother to credit for the wisdom that I've applied to my life that has kept me chaste and helped me value chastity even as a woman in now almost my mid-20s. And it began when I was a very young girl, like early teen years, but especially when I transitioned from homeschool because I was homeschooled for some years and then went to high school at a Christian private school. My mother and her mother both waited for their husbands. My mom did not wait for her wedding, but she waited for my dad. My grandma did wait for marriage at 21, and my mom was 27 when I think she met my dad. So the background is that my mother, from her own experience of waiting as long as she did, also had experience with saying no to many counterfeits. And her mother, who my maternal grandma also helped raise me, also had experience rejecting counterfeits. And modesty was a huge part of what I was taught being raised in my mother's house and with her side of the family, specifically with her mom. So for one, when I was a teenager and I was going through, puberty, I was experiencing raging hormones, it was my mom who kept me in check. When she saw me wearing an outfit that in any way she knew would have sent the wrong message, she would have told me, go to your room and change your clothes. And so when the time came that I was also surrounded by other young women, when I did go to school with others in high school, there were, even at a Christian private school, certain girls who did not value chastity or biblical sexual purity. I don't know what the reason was, if it was because they were raised in what people call purity culture and they were just rebellious, or if they just didn't have that background. But I found in my own experience of high school that girls who tended to be more popular tended to be girls who were more promiscuous or sexually provocative in the way they dress and their mannerisms. And my mother, knowing this, whenever she saw me being tempted to be more provocative in how I dress and my manner and all that, and demeanor and all that, she would pull me aside, and when I'd show her a certain girl who was, for example, popular before I graduated high school, she would say, that girl's a tart. And that's why you see that girl getting used and dumped by these different guys. Is that what you want for your life? And of course, having my mother's counsel, I understood that even though at the time when I was a young, impressionable teenage girl, and promiscuity and being sexually provocative as a young lady and being sexualized, being presented in my environment and among my peers as being somehow favorable or good as a young woman, at home, I had the wisdom of my mother and the Holy Spirit leading my mom to correct me when necessary and warn me, no, this is not God's perfect will for your life. And what you do now as a teenager will impact your reputation as an adult and your life permanently. You cannot rely on your teenage brain, which it's not fully developed according to science until later, like in the 20s. And so you need to be mindful. You cannot just go on what your peers are doing based on their impulses, and you can't live based on your impulses. This is what my mother continually taught me. And so my mother was very strict, and she was also very open with me about the consequences of choosing not to use prudence as a young woman. And this honestly raised me to have the fear of the Lord regarding my own choices as a young woman. And it did help me remain chaste and value chastity in my own life. I didn't truly understand the value of what I was doing until I actually entered into my 20s. So after I graduated high school and started going to college and understood upon seeing the long-term impact that promiscuity and becoming sexually active as a teenager had on the lives of certain women who were my peers. And it did indeed have a long-term impact. And I understood once I became an adult that even though it wasn't popular when I was a teen girl, it was worth it to wait until I was an adult. Because to this day, I am able to say that I'm waiting for my spouse. I'm setting the best foundation that I can for whenever God's timing is for me to get married, to have the most stable, long-lasting family unit, and have the greatest chance of success and a lasting marriage and home for not just me and my spouse, but for also our future children. And this did impact my life in more than one way. And I never imagined the impact it would have on my female friendships, because since the decision to be chaste and wait into my 20s was not common, I did not anticipate how many friendships I would lose in the process. I'm thankful that I did have a mother who waited as long as she did, because my mother waited until she was 27, and she has been sympathetic, at least somewhat, regarding my struggles as a young single lady who is still saving myself and my virginity for my wedding, for wedlock, for marriage. But as an adult, I honestly have seen a lot of rivalry as a young woman. And the matter of saving myself, when it comes to female friendships, honestly, this matter of something that has nothing to do with female friendships at all, because my decision to wait for marriage involves the most intimate part of my life, which has nothing to do with my friends. But as an adult, I did observe that this matter did permeate how other women perceived me, interacted with me, and there was jealousy and competition. There would be girls who, even though I didn't think of myself as a judgmental person, I was staying in my lane and doing what I needed to do to respect my boundaries, body, and exercise self-control, they would take that as me insulting them. They would take that as me looking down on them. When it's like, no, I'm just respecting how I was raised by my mother. I'm honoring my parents, who both wanted me to wait for marriage since they didn't do it themselves. And they saw, bad fruit come from that. I'm respecting the way I was raised, and I'm also staying biblical. So one of the biggest negative things I experienced as a virgin who's been chaste to my age of almost 25, I'm still 24, but turned 25 in some months, has been, it truly cost me female friendships to choose to be a biblical woman and remain chaste and a virgin until marriage. And I never saw that coming. I never saw the ways that my decision to be chaste would affect other women's interactions with me, even with regard to things that had nothing to do with my chastity. I would try to make progress in terms of like career in the past, look for advice surrounding school. And I would see women see my requests for help and assistance from them, like as a sister, as a friend, to like for well-meaning advice to get, to make progress in my own life. They would see that as a threat and make backhanded compliments and give me advice that was kind of like, I mentioned in a previous video, the concept of men, when they found out I was a virgin, trying to quote unquote neg me into compromise. So they would make backhanded compliments and flirtations that really weren't flirtations. They were insults disguised as flirtations to try to mess with my self-esteem and get me to compromise by using psychological manipulation and reverse psychology. So in a similar way, I would see this manifest in my female friendships, where women would do a form of negging, but instead of being with the purpose of getting me to compromise, it would be to, in the case of female friendships, to prevent me from getting ahead in a certain point, in a certain aspect of my life, such as if I wanted to further my career, if I felt the need to make a decision for my health. And part of the plan was to wait for marriage and make sure I was exercising self-control and respecting my boundaries. The girl would see that as a threat and start giving me advice and be like, oh no, don't do that. Don't worry about this. Don't be so uptight. How about and the girl would become invasive with her advice and give me unsolicited advice. But it would eventually come out that the woman was seeing me as competition for the simple reason that I chose to be chaste. And the friendship would eventually dissolve that way, because I wasn't looking at it as a competition. I was just exercising self-control and walking in obedience in the way that my parents taught me to. And I would just lose friendships because other women would take that as a threat to whether it was to their own independence, to their own, whatever it was. I just saw and experienced a lot of cattiness, and I'm going to be transparent and say that as a chaste woman who has been waiting for marriage, it has cost me female friendships. And I've had to learn to stand on my boundaries, stand on my priorities, and surround myself with community who also values traditional biblical womanhood, including marriage, the family, motherhood, and all those things, and setting a foundation for all those things to thrive, even when it's meant not having every other girl like me or want to be my friend. So that's been honestly one of the biggest lessons I've taken away from my journey. If you want to be a virgin as a girl and wait for marriage, you have to understand that you're not living in a society where that is common, or even where that's necessarily socially accepted. And so in advance, you have to have the mindset that you're doing what you're doing, you're choosing chastity, self-control, and all of those things for you and for your future family, even while you don't have it or see it. And you have to forget about butthurt female friends and women who you didn't ask for their opinions, but because they think they know better than you, they gave you their opinions anyway. You have to choose to stand on your values, especially biblically. You always have to start with the Bible as a Christian young woman who makes the decision to be chaste. Because the bad advice of other women who are hiding jealousy, rivalry, and competition and envy in their hearts can genuinely destroy your life if you are misled by their advice. So I'm just thankful to God for keeping me thus far, and thankful to all the women who haven't been like that, who have genuinely been sisters in Christ, who have wanted the same thing for themselves, have wanted their own lives, marriages, and families to thrive, even if they're single and waiting on the Lord. Just the ones who have the mindset, I want to live biblically regardless of what that entails. And I don't care about what the girl next to me is doing. I care about what's going to guarantee the best chance of success for my own future in life. That's the mindset you have to have if you're going to choose to be a virgin and wait for marriage as a girl as part of Gen Z, I'll say. But yeah, I hope this video was informative, and I trust God to send it to whoever it's for.